For your leadership in worship, and we can thank him again. I thought it was just wonderful to have us collectively from many parts of the country and parts of the world here worshiping together in this beautiful place. So thank you for your leadership. And it's good to be here at Mount Hermon. Once again, a place that I love for many reasons, which I'll have the privilege of sharing with you over the course of our days together. Just so you know a little bit about me, my name is Richard Dahlstrom. I've been married 43 years. It'll be 44 in September. My wife is with me. She sits outside in the back there. We have 3 grown children, all in their 30s, 4 grandchildren, 1 dog, and we're living a life that we very much love, but it hasn't always been that way. And so I wanted to just share a moment with you that occurred for me in the year 2006 or so that led to this series as we look at Ecclesiastes. So in 2006, I'm the pastor of a really rapidly growing church in Seattle. I'm working on a book. I love my life. I love my family. I love God. I love my job. Everything is clicking. We've all had such seasons, right? And so one of the patterns that was going on when life was going so well for me is I would go up to a little cabin by the Canadian border from Seattle on Thursday night, my Friday being my day off, and I'd spend Friday morning writing, and then Friday afternoon, I'd ski. I was working on a book, and so I'd write in the morning, ski in the afternoon, come back, and tear up what I wrote in the morning in the evening, usually, because that's the way writing goes, but that's a different story. So I'm skiing on a Friday afternoon, Mount Baker ski area, right by the Canadian border. It's bluebird sunshine. And it snowed the night before. There's fresh powder. I'm alone, and I'm an introvert. It's perfect, right? There's nobody on the mountain. Everything's just going really, really well. And so I'm skiing on chair 8, I remember specifically, and I'm loving everything about it. It's black diamond, really difficult skiing, and it's just like, yeah, life cannot get better. Boom, right? And then God speaks to me, like not audibly, but I hear it. Hey, enjoy it, Richard. This isn't going to last. So I ski down, go back up, ski down again. Are you listening? You're not going to ski forever. Super depressing, right? So I moved over to chair 2 thinking God wouldn't be there. Ski chair 2, and here's the same voice. Even this ski hill will be gone. These trees will be gone. Skied a little bit more. All afternoon, this voice. I'm like, at the time, in my very early 50s, late 40s, something like that. And you're just getting to the point where you can kind of see the far distance, a horizon. Do you understand what I'm saying? And then these voices are here. Boy, soak it up, buddy, because this does not last forever. And I went home that night again to the cabin, and alone, cooked myself a nice meal, ate, and spent the evening reading 3 times through the book of Ecclesiastes. And with tears in my eyes. It was so powerful. I'd never preached on the book. I'd avoided actually reading it because it's kind of depressing on the first glance, actually, as we'll see tonight. But if you can deal with what the priest king is saying to us in Ecclesiastes, the foundation is laid for a few things. Number one, you're going to live as a person of incredible joy and hope, and you'll savor every single day as a gift from God. And that's the way you're supposed to live. So that's the first good thing. Second thing, you'll have a lens through which to interpret the world that will help people that you know who are living lives of despair and anxiety and fear and cynicism and depression and loneliness, which, by the way, is almost everyone in 2023. So I'm a fan of this book for those reasons. I was praying about what to bring to you at Mount Hermon back in May. I started studying Paul. I'm so glad I didn't do that because Peter's doing that in the morning. And then it just was laid on my heart to share with you Ecclesiastes, so that's what we're going to do. So I want to set a little bit of context, and we're going to go through some things this evening in chapter 1. And I'm going to start by sharing with you that this book is what's called kingly wisdom. In the Bible, before kingly wisdom, there was priestly wisdom. And priestly wisdom, if you want a great example of it, could be found in Deuteronomy 28. It's formulaic. Do you know what I mean by that? If you do this, this will happen. Boom. Right? Here's God in Deuteronomy 28. You obey me, and your crops will be blessed. Your herds will be blessed. There'll be no infertility. You'll win every war. You'll never max out your credit card. Everything will go perfectly well. That's my paraphrase, but read it. That's exactly what it's saying. You'll live on top of the world. All you do, obey God. That's your input. What's the output? Like stellar success. Here's the problem. As the Bible evolves, it doesn't always work that way. Asaph in Psalm 73, he says, hey, I've got a problem. Now I'm paraphrasing again, but here's Asaph. He says, I don't get it. I'm looking around at my evil neighbors, and things are going better for them than me. And I am trying to serve you, God. I'm doing the right things. I'm praying. I'm tithing. I'm reading. I'm devoting my Sunday morning to, worship instead of football. And yet my neighbors are staying home. They're happier than me. They're wealthier than me. They're healthier than me. They drink organic coffee and sit on the porch on Sunday morning and read the Seattle Times, and I got to go to church. And it's still not working for me. What's up with that? So what we need to answer that question is not the priestly wisdom of Deuteronomy 28, but the kingly wisdom of the book of Ecclesiastes. So what's Ecclesiastes about? Well, the main phrase in the book of Ecclesiastes is the phrase life under the sun, which could be translated this way. Here's the priest king. He's saying, hey, listen, everybody. I'm going to tell you this is how it really is. And I love this because what it means is there's no sales pitch in Ecclesiastes. This is not a brochure trying to sell God. In fact, it's just raw honesty. And I'm convinced that this kind of honesty is the front door for the good news of life in Christ for 99% of Americans. You want to know why? Because we live in an age of jaded cynicism where everyone thinks that the guy on the platform is trying to sell something. It's one of the reasons lots of people are leaving church. So there's a thesis here at the beginning, and this guy comes to us. He says, let me tell you how it really is. And that's that phrase, life under the sun. And then the other word that's used all through the book is the Hebrew word havel, which means vanity of vanities or emptiness. But literally the word is smoke. What he's saying in Ecclesiastes is finding satisfaction in life under the sun. Watch this. It's like trying to grab smoke. How's that working for you? Got it. That's why Ecclesiastes is powerful. I mean, we live in an age with all the marketing that goes on and all the AI images that philosophers have called a post-truth age. And in a post-truth age, people don't believe what they hear from the pulpit or what they read on the internet or even what they hear on the news, depending on the source, right? So what people do believe, though, what's undeniable is our experience, right? I mean, we can debate all kinds of things. Here's one thing we all know. We're sitting at Mount Hermon. Nobody's going to debate that. Never mind your political stripe, your view on heaven and hell. This is what we know. This is the way it is. We're here. This is our life right now. This is it. We know it. We all know nobody would debate it, right? So that what the preacher king does is he says, I'm going to lay out my experience for everyone to see. And the reason that his experience will resonate with ours is because he's explaining the realities of life under the sun, and those realities apply not just to kings, but to peasants. Not just to men, but to women. Not just to gay, but to straight. Not just to Christians, but to Muslims. These apply to everybody. This is the world we live in. This is life under the sun. And then, once he's depressed you with that, which I will do for the next 20 minutes, then he provides an answer. So we're going to look at three things tonight. Number one, we're going to look at the under-the-sun realities. Number two, we're going to look at how we as a species try and fix those realities, or how we deal with those realities. And number three, we're going to look at the gospel path, right? Under-the-sun realities, the hovel, the empty responses, and the gospel path. And this really sets the table for us to become profound people of hope, as we'll see in our time together. So let's begin with under-the-sun realities by looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2. And so the words of the preacher, son of David, most people believe it's Solomon. I believe it's Solomon. But it doesn't matter at a level because the truth is the same no matter who wrote it. And here's what the preacher says. Hovel, 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 everything is hovel. Right? Vanity of vanities, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So now, that's where he starts. And so what he's saying here is, when you look at the world in which we live, things look promising, right? And pick your topic: health, children, vocation, your political stripe, your church life, your children. Things look promising, and they are until what? Until they're not. It's the way it is. So now, this is what he does. He basically says two things. Number one, and it's on the slide there. Number one, nothing that we want to keep lasts. That's what he's telling us in Ecclesiastes chapter 1. All the kind of the best stuff in life is all temporary. What advantage does a man have in all his work which he does under the sun? Verse 3, a generation comes, a generation goes, the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun sets, hastens to its place, rises there again. So skipping down to verse 11, you kind of see this ongoing theme. There's no remembrance of earlier things. The latter things, which will occur, there will also be for them no remembrance among those who come later still. So we're here, we're living our life, it's meaningful, but remember, it's not going to last, right? And so every gift, and we have gifts, every gift is kind of unsustainable. In Hebrew literature, there's this big question: what will last? And so he begins the book by saying nothing that we want to keep will last. Look at verse 15 and 16 of chapter 2, right? Then I said to myself, as is the fate of the fool, it will also befall me. Why have I been wise? I said to myself, this is vanity, because there's no lasting remembrance of the wise man. As with the fool, inasmuch as the coming days, everyone will be forgotten. The wise man and the fool alike, everybody dies. So he's kind of starting, it's like a cold shower, right? Nobody wants it. You're like, really? Why would we do this? And so that's what he's saying. Nothing lasts. Now here's the big problem fundamentally with our own culture. We don't believe that. We think as humans, oh yeah, it doesn't last for Dave Burns, but if I invest better than him, exercise better than him, if you're a Christian, pray harder than him, I'm going to build kind of a bomb-proof life, right? And so there's every stripe of product available to you to sustain and, quote-unquote, eternalize that thing that you don't want to lose, right? So we live in a culture of massive, cult-like self-improvement. I mean, it's in finances as people sit around and ponder their 401k and, what bouquet of investments is going to be the best thing, and, how do you hedge your bets with short sales and puts and calls and whatever all that nonsense is. I don't understand none of it. But the theory behind all of the investment stuff is this: if I could just find the right little magic thing, I'll get to a point like that guy with the big barns in Luke 12 where I can say, done. Don't need anything now. I'm set for the rest of my life. And here's the thing, you're not going to get there. Then, what about your health? What are we going to do with that? Oh, man. Type into Google, I want to live to 105, and just watch what happens. 3 million hits. Oh, you need fish oil, You need probiotics. You need ashwagandha. You need herbs. You need vitamins. You need an e-bike because at least you'll ride a little bit. And then along comes the purist, the fundamentalist, the zealot. He says, no, you don't need, man, an e-bike. That's a sellout, man. You're going to die young because you got an e-bike. There's a debate about e-bikes, a debate about herbs, a debate about vitamins. But whatever is the point, here's the thing. You can work on it and, hello, it still ends. You got anxious. You dropped a lot of coin. But did you fix anything? The picture there is of an avalanche lily. We live in a snowy place, and there's a week in May where I like to hike up through the snow into this one place where these guys show up in early May. So the snow's just melted, and out of the snow comes these little avalanche lilies, and they're there. We saw these on a Tuesday, and on a Tuesday, they're that beautiful. And just picture like half an acre of these on a hillside sloping down and up with a waterfall above it. That's where we live. Beautiful, it's a gift. So, weeks earlier, you couldn't cross, it was all snow. Now it's avalanche lilies. Now, so we hiked on Tuesday, and then I thought, I wonder what it's like on Friday. I went back Friday. They look like old people, and I don't mean to offend anybody, because I'm old, right? They look like me, like they're done. They're over the hill. You're like, these guys lasted, 3 days, and their story is over. At least we get 80 years or whatever. But our fate is the same. That's why every May I go to the avalanche lilies to remind myself. How long are we here? A little bit. And so there are lots of reminders in the text and in life that everything is here for a time and then it leaves. Money comes and then it leaves. Or even if it doesn't leave because you're some miracle worker with your money, you leave and your money stays, right? Either way, you lose your money. Even in the best marriage, and I feel like I have a really good marriage. I mean, we're here. This is the first time in 4 years that we've been alone out of our house, right? Because my wife is caring for my mother-in-law. We love it, and it's good, and it's all wonderful. But we love each other, profoundly, and we have a lot of fun together. We laugh together, and it's great. And I know this, unless we both fall into an avalanche or something or a crevasse and get killed at the same time, one of us is going to be alone. We just know that. So I work on our marriage. It doesn't mean it'll last. Your job, I loved my job as senior pastor of a church in Seattle. But I knew, without any doubt, it was time to pass the torch of leadership to a new generation, partly because that was our mission statement, right? Pass it on to the next generation. And so we did, and so that job didn't last. By the way, nation states don't last either, let alone political parties. So we can kind of calm down. It's not going to be, nothing's the end of the world here, but all this stuff comes and goes, comes and goes, comes and goes. We can calm down because we have a different kingdom entirely that we'll get to at the end here. But understand, nothing that we will have many gifts that will pass through our lives, but don't try and grab it. It's like grabbing smoke. And if you grab it, it'll become an idol, destroy you. Remember, it was shortly after the Columbine school shooting, in the 90s. My youngest child, we had a trampoline in our backyard, and with each kid, the trampoline was for me, a very bonding space, right? For different reasons with each kid. So anyway, my youngest child at the time wasn't yet into the crazy games I would play with my older son on the trampoline. She was like 5 or something like that. And Columbine had just happened, and the news feed is super depressing, and it's a violent world, and it's an unsafe world, and it's an increasingly unsafe world, and there's debates about guns, and on and on and on it goes. Okay. And then here's my daughter, and so we're not jumping on the trampoline, we're laying on the trampoline together. We're laying, and we're watching the clouds, beautiful Seattle day, those kind of April days when the sun comes out, and then the clouds are all kinds of different shapes, and so here's my 5-year-old. Oh, there's Winnie the Pooh. Oh, there's Brer Rabbit. Oh, there's Mickey Mouse. Oh, there's, and she's naming the clouds with her imagination, all these forms. And then she said something to me about Mom and I and our marriage, and then she said, I bet you, Christy, her older sister, I bet you Christy gets married someday. I said, yeah, she probably will. And I bet Noah gets married, my son. He probably will. And then I said, I bet you will get married. And she puts her head right here, and she's looking at the clouds, and then she gets up and she puts her face right here. She said, oh, Daddy, I'm never going to marry. I want to be with you forever. Now, can't you just kind of freeze that and carry it with you to the grave? And the preacher king says, no, you can't. In fact, now she's home caring for Donna's mom and our dog while we're here. Nothing lasts that we want to keep. But there's a flip side to that, also bad news. Nothing you want to get rid of disappears. I'm not making this up, it's in the Bible. Read with me, look at verse 9. That which has been is that which will be. That which has been done is that which will be done. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there anything one which might say, oh, look, this is new? Already it's existed for ages, which were before us. Hey, watch this. In a postmodern world, we're not all going to agree on which version of the news is accurate, right? Is the Justice Department weaponized now, or was it weaponized under the previous administration? We're not going to talk about that. I promise you, if we did, in a room this size, we wouldn't all agree. Who cares? We wouldn't all agree about whether women can preach. We wouldn't all agree about whether hell is, literal fire or something else. There's a lot we can argue about, but what I love about Ecclesiastes is it begins not with our differences, but it begins with what we can all agree about. And what we can all agree about is where any search for truth must begin, and everyone agrees with the second reality. And what's it saying here? Look, it's in the Bible, right? There will always be what? Poverty, always. Jesus said it. What did he say? The poor you'll always have with you. Now watch this. There will always be wars and rumors of wars, always. Just let that sit for a minute. There will always be wars. Really? I would have thought that the 20th century being what it was, we would have collectively as a species come to our senses, right? I mean, the 20th century saw Europe in the 40s and totalitarian communism in Russia, the combined effect of which were over 50 million dead. And that doesn't even mention, Pol Pot and Saddam Hussein and all the other things, and Vietnam, just go on and on and on and on. You'd like to think that we could wake up at the end of a century and say collectively, well, we don't know, we can't agree on who God is, but we can agree on one thing, let's stop shooting each other. You'd think so. But here's the deal, no. There's always going to be Bob Dylan. There's always going to be Joni Mitchell. My wife and I just went to James Taylor concert. I was telling Dave down in Woodinville near us up in Washington. And, he and his band sang this just stunningly beautiful a cappella song about their longings for peace and justice in the world. Those songs will always be written. And then there's going to be a school shooting. And then there's going to be a Putin. And there's going to be a war. And there's going to be a civil war. And there's going to be slavery. I went to Thailand and en route to teach at the Torchwood School in India one time, and ended up having to spend the night in Bangkok because of a flight delay. And this guy, bellhop, takes me to my room, opens the door, shows me how to turn the air conditioning on, shows me how to turn the hot water on the shower. And then he says to me, this is in Bangkok, early 90s, when do you want the girl? I pull out my wallet, I go, excuse me? I'm married. I have a wife here I love. I have 3 kids that I love. I don't want a girl. He says, lovely family, but she comes with a room. By the way, $20 for the room. What do you want the girl? I said, I don't want anyone knocking on this door. I was so mad. Get out. Okay, he leaves, angry at me. He said, there's no refund. I'm sick to my stomach. I'm like, I'm not staying here. I'm walking out. I'm walking down the hall, and here's a girl dressed for work, 14. I go home and do some research, realize she'll probably sleep with 15 to 20 men a night. Probably sold by her parents, because they had too many children, couldn't afford to feed them all. That's our world. I have a friend, he's a pastor in Seattle. Seattle did the redlining thing and race, and so there's a predominantly black section of Seattle and white section of Seattle. He came up to where my church is, predominantly white section of Seattle. We're going out for coffee, and there's a place, and it's like California, right turns are legal on a red light if nobody's coming. And my friend Otis, he says to me, hey, Richard, can I turn right at this light? I go, yeah. He goes, no, I don't think you understand. Can I turn right at this light? Of course you can. He pulls her aside before getting to the intersection. He says, hey, let me explain to you what I mean by this. Can I, a black man in predominantly white Seattle, turn right at this intersection because I've been pulled over for ostensible but non-existent traffic violations over 40 times in my life in Seattle. I mean, this is liberal, enlightened, post-racist Seattle. Really? No. Listen, nothing that you want to go away can you get rid of. Nothing you want to keep can you keep. Now I can hear you guys. I wish I'd chosen a different week because this is super depressing. I've got a little bit more bad news, and then we turn the corner, okay? The whole rest of the week's good news, but a little bit more bad. Here we go. So what's the humans get it. Everyone gets what I just said. I don't care if you're left, right, gay, straight, liberal, conservative, rich, poor, young, old. When I have these conversations, everyone is nodding their head. Yep, we understand. This is our world. So that's good news, because this is a touch point with eternal scripture that points people to Jesus. But then the preacher king, he says, now let me tell you how I tried to deal with these really harsh realities. And I tried a few things. So number one, the Hobble response, if we go to the next slide, the Hobble response, number one, is this: hey, I know, it's a bad world. This is what we'll do. We'll fix it. That's one of those cool bullet journals that are so popular. And I'm kind of mocking them. I know some of you do them. But the reason I'm doing that is because embedded in it a little bit is this sense of, man, if we can just order our lives and do the best stuff and do it properly, all will be well. Maybe, but listen to this guy, right? Here's the first thing. I don't want to fix these problems. So this is the belief that with enough wisdom and knowledge, we're going to be able to find the way forward and fix the messes that we've made. But in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 14 and 15, the wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness, and yet one fate befalls them both. And I said to myself, as is the fate of the fool, it will also befall me. This too is vanity. There's no lasting remembrance of the wise man. Why? Because the wise man, though he was wise, didn't fix the systemic cultural issues. He didn't do it. So he was wise. Maybe he lived a good life, but he could not fix the systemic problems of a broken humanity. Ultimately, the preacher king will tell us that wisdom is better than foolishness, right? But right here he's telling us that if we believe that with enough wisdom we're going to be able to fix this broken world, this is what he's saying. You're kidding yourself. You won't fix it. Daniel was super wise, lived in Babylon, was able to rise above the idolatry that was all around him, the kind I'll address next. But although Daniel lived with wisdom and rose above the idolatry of Babylon, Babylon remained Babylon, right? You're called to be light in the midst of darkness. So don't be surprised if in spite of your wisdom and your organization and mobilization of people and your voting, don't be surprised if your wisdom doesn't save the world. It never could. This should be liberating for us because we look back at the early church, and the early church was like this. We're going to bless everyone that we come in contact with, however we can. And, you know, they were in the Roman Empire where babies were held in such low esteem, particularly female babies, that they were just sometimes birthed and then tossed on garbage piles. And Christ followers would come and they'd pick those babies up and they'd bring them into their homes and they'd raise them. And they had no illusion that in so doing, they would ever fix the systemic problem. They were the salt in the midst of decay, and the decay was still there. They were the light in the midst of the darkness, and the darkness was still there. The darkness is there, be light. The decay is there, be hope. But don't kid yourself. Even when you live as a person of hope, the decay still happens. So that's one thing. Let's try to fix it. Here's another thing. Well, you know what? Tough world. We're going to escape from the pain of that. How? Either through work or money or sex and pleasure. Now, in verses 4 through 6 of chapter 2, you kind of notice the kind of work that this king did is really good work. I enlarged my works. I built houses. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks. I planted all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water from which to irrigate forests of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves. I had homeborn slaves. I possessed flocks and herds, more than all that preceded me in Jerusalem. So, his work, basically, he's creating stuff, right? This king likes to create, as do many people who work. You create spreadsheets. You create a ranch. You create good food. You create code. You create cell phones. You create music. You create a space for people in which worship can occur. People like to create. We're made to create. You create ropes courses. You create experiences for troubled kids. You create a lovely table for supper. You create clean laundry. You create. It's great. Work is great. But understand that your work is not your identity. Why? Because. You know why, right? It's good. And you went to Stanford or UCLA or Berkeley or Cal Poly, and then you got a great job, and then you did well, and you got promoted, and then you got promoted a little bit more, and then you became an onboarding mentor, whatever that means, and then you were starting to do performance reviews, but then you broke your leg, and then you got depressed, and then your wife left you, and then you couldn't function anymore, and that's not a made-up story. I'm a pastor. So, even if you make it to the very end, you're not going to work forever. It's not your identity. Oh, I know then. Money. That's good. Because we live in the most prosperous nation on the planet. And yet, though that's true, a couple of other things are also true. Number one, people with lots of money aren't inherently happier than those with less. Because money ultimately has nothing to do with satisfaction, but until we believe this, we think that money's the solution. You guys, many of you don't know my story. I went to Talbot Seminary, and then I was going to go teach at a Bible college in Alaska because I love the outdoors, and I didn't want to be a pastor, but the job didn't open up that I'd nailed for a year, so we had this blank year, and a church in the San Juan Islands of Washington State invited me to be their pastor for 6 months, interim pastor. It was perfect, right? Come do this thing for 6 months, and then move to Alaska. That was 39 years ago, and I've been a pastor that whole time. So when I tell people God tricked me into becoming a pastor, that's what happened. Like 6 months, and then eventually they asked me to stay, and we prayed about it. We knew we should stay, so we did stay. So we stayed in Friday Harbor.
So we're living in San Juan Islands. Now, I don't know if you know them, but it's as beautiful as Mount Herman with whales, right? It's amazing. So we're this beautiful spot, and but we're not rich. The church is 50 people. I'm making so much money that we got free milk and cheese from the government for our children. We're living in a trailer. We're burning wood for heat, but we're as happy, and I'm not kidding you, as happy as we could possibly be. We love the place. Eventually, I'll get into that. We love the work. It's all, it's great, and we were poor as mice, if that's a saying. I don't know. So then, I was preaching one day on Paul in Philippians 4 and his capacity for contentment. And what does Paul say in Philippians? He says, I've learned to be content in any circumstance. Wealth, poverty, full belly, hunger, in jail, out of jail. I can do all things through Christ. But contentment, I've learned to be content in any circumstance. This guy comes up to me after the sermon with tears in his eyes. He says, I have to talk to you. I will give you any amount of money to talk to you. Can you come to my house? And so I went and I visited him at his house on the west coast of this island. And, it's overlooking the Strait of Juan de Fuca. You're looking across the water to Vancouver Island and the lights of Victoria. He could see, whales jumping and bald eagles. It doesn't get any better than this. And here's the story. He goes, made all my money down here, Silicon Valley, software boom, at the very, very beginning of that stuff, late 70s, early 80s. And then he goes, had a lot of money, but wasn't happy, and so tried sexual crazy stuff, tried Esalen, all kinds of different religion things. He said that he used to, be in the redwoods somewhere, certainly not Mount Herman, naked, sipping Chardonnay. I don't think Mike has that on the brochure anywhere, so it's probably not here. But it's like, picture people with gobs of money wandering around looking for meaning. Are you with me? Like you live in that world. You live in that world. That's between here and the city, that's the world you live in. Gobs of money, but no satisfaction. And he's weeping in his house, or he says, you said you're content. I haven't known a moment of contentment since I was a child. With all that, for him, money had become mammon. That's the word mammon in the Bible. When Jesus talks about money as mammon, mammon literally means a demon that encourages greed, stupidity, and endless dissatisfaction. Did you know that's the meaning of the word mammon? Mammon encourages greed, stupidity, and endless dissatisfaction. His words, I've never known a minute of contentment. I've known stress. I've known lust for power. I've known lust for market share. I've known influence, but I haven't known contentment. I mean, I live in Seattle, home of Amazon. You've heard of it, probably. And there's people in our church who are high up in that community. Early on, there was a policy at Amazon of always culling the bottom 10% of employees, just getting rid of the non-performers, right? And I asked somebody who was high up in HR, I said, when you work with employees, how many of the employees think that they're probably in the bottom 10%, and so they're working too hard and are at risk of burnout? How many think they're in the bottom 10%? Oh, she said, 90% of the employees think they're in the bottom 10%. And so they're going to work more than they need to because they're terrified of losing a high-paying job because housing in Seattle costs a fortune, not to mention schools, and et cetera, et cetera. And of course, there's a reality that if your identity is your job, you're heading for a mighty collision at the end of your story when the phone stops ringing. And you're not doing that anymore. So money doesn't work doesn't work, sex and pleasure doesn't work. We've already talked about the Chardonnay and the woods and all that stuff. But, Marianne Layden, who is the co-director of sexual trauma and psychopathology at Pennsylvania Center for Cognitive Therapy, she says that pornography in America is the most concerning thing to psychological health in existence today. Why? Because the internet is the perfect drug delivery system, because you're anonymous, aroused, and have role models for these behaviors to have that drug pumped into your house 24/7, and children know how to use it better than grown-ups know how to use it. It's a perfect delivery system if we want to destroy an entire generation. And it's happening. Shame, withdrawal from reality, social dysfunction, anxiety. As humans, we seek to escape pain, and the preacher is saying that our go-to means of escaping pain doesn't work. Can't fix the problems, can't escape the pain through work, money, sex, and pleasure. Okay, so let's pray and get out of here. No, not really. You need hope. You need hope. So what do we do with all this? Now, what? This is just off the map, stunning to me when you get to the end of chapter 2. Because if you've been listening at all, like I'm kind of watching your body language, and you're like, oh, slinking down, and it's like, oh. You're not disagreeing with me, I don't think, but it's painful. But that, remember, that's hovel. And in other words, it like nothing lasts, but it's life under the sun. This is life without the God factor. Okay? This is the way it is. Take God out of the equation, this is the way it is. Now, then his conclusion. Verse 24 of chapter 2. Listen to this. There's nothing better then for a man than to eat and drink and tell himself that his labor is good. This I've seen is also from the hand of God. Who can eat and who can have enjoyment without God? What a weird leap, right? Bad, 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 bad. It's like a movie where everyone dies, and the final act, they just jump up and start singing again, right? And you're like, how did that happen? That's this situation, but here's the deal. The author is setting a table here for the rest of the book, a feast of answers which will lead to what I call a God-saturated life. But here's the deal. You will not even be willing to eat that feast unless you're hungry. And you won't be hungry unless you take a good look at life under the sun. Are you hearing me? Because life under the sun over here, right? Buying and selling, wealth, sexual pleasure, work, marriage, kids, religion. Life under the sun is super attractive. We can go after it. We can set goals. We think we can control it. And so we go and we work and then we get it and we get it just right. But here's what he's saying. It will, boom, collapse. It will. That carefully constructed life, it'll collapse. You're going to face suffering, as Peter spoke of so eloquently this morning. It's inevitable. So lean into that reality, and your heart will be open to turning to Christ. In other words, what does it say in Psalm 27:4? One thing I desire, to behold the beauty of the Lord. One thing, 2 Corinthians 3:16-18 says it in the same way, and I'll unpack this in a moment. I want to dwell in the house of the Lord, and 2 Corinthians 3:16 says this. We all, with unveiled faces, right? So I'm living with some sort of illusion. Now I've stripped away all the illusion. Now I with unveiled faces, what does he say? He says, now we're beholding the glory of the Lord. And when I behold the glory of the Lord, what happens? I'm transformed from glory to glory to glory. I move from despair to hope, from darkness to light, from hate to love, from lust to purity, from greed to generosity, from anxiety to peace. And I'm not even trying to move. I'm just looking for God. And delighting every time I see a glimpse of God's goodness. So this is how I want to encourage you for this week. Watch this. Look for the glory of God. All week long. Look for the glory. Yeah, oh, great. Richard, where do we find it? 3 places. Creation, text, and one another. You'll find the glory of God. Look. Be looking for God's glory. Why do you find it in creation? Well, because Psalm 19 says that the heavens are preaching the glory of God. And if only there was some beautiful creation around here that we could pay attention to. we ran a wilderness ministry for a number of years, and man, there was this gal, and she came. We did a weekend for high school kids. About 20 of them would come, and I would do apologetics for high school seniors, prepping them for college. And this gal comes. First night, she says, "Hey, I want to let you know, a friend invited me. I'm here for the rock climbing. I don't believe in, this Jesus stuff at all. My dad's a biologist," and I was like this, "Whatever, we're glad you're here." And then I did my lessons, proving the resurrection, proving the historicity of the text, proving our need for a Savior, prove, logic, archaeology, manuscripts, higher criticism, all that good stuff. And then we're hiking, so I kind of inched up to her. I said, "Hey, how'd you like the talks?" She said, "They were the most boring. I wasn't even listening." She said, "It's just the worst thing, why are you trying? You're not going to convince me of anything." I was like, "Okay, well, thanks for being here anyway, right?" And then we get up to the top of this ridge in the Cascade Mountains. If you look west, the sun's setting. If you look west, you can see the San Juan Islands, where I used to live. If you look to the north, you see Mount Baker turning fiery pink. If you look south, you see all the way to Mount Rainier. Bluebird day, sunshine in the water, absolute perfection. Someone had brought a guitar. We built a fire up there. We're roasting hot dogs, and someone starts singing, that old Psalm 19. Dun, 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 the stars are in the sky, telling you and I of the glory of God. You know the song? Anyway, so there we go. We did that thing, and people are singing, and then people are sharing a little bit of testimony, and she leaves the circle. I'm like, okay, here we go. She's offended again, So I go to pick up the pieces, and she's crying. I said, "What's up?" She says, "I don't know what happened. Your talks were terrible. But when I look around, beyond any explanation, I know there's a creator, and I want to know him." Before she left our house, she'd prayed to receive Christ. She was baptized the next Sunday. And it wasn't my preaching. It was creation. Pay attention, man. This is incredible. These trees are ripe with holiness. These trees are. I came here as a kid, and so I love to sit right back there when other people are speaking and look at the trees and think, these trees were here. I go stand on the bridge over the creek, and I can see myself as a little kid. So, finding creation. Finding the text, because the text gives us the arc of history, and we know that this life under the sun is not the end of the story. This is like a little rain squall in the timeline of eternity, in which things are revealed, and in which the love of God is revealed as infinite and matchless and unconditional and irrevocable and all that stuff. And so we begin to live as people of hope because of this trajectory that we find in the text, and we find Jesus, the consummate human, who alone fulfilled our vocation, which is to bear the image of God. He did it perfectly. Become obsessed with Jesus, follow Jesus, know Jesus, let Jesus live in you, look for Jesus in every text, and finally find the image of God in one another. So here's basically what happens in all of our lives. Watch this. We have a story, and for many of us in this room, not maybe all, but many of us, in our childhood, it was a great story. And then, boy, something happens. My life, I was adopted into a great family. My dad was a hardworking veteran of World War II, became a school teacher, then a principal. My family, the family into which I was adopted, was deep in faith. I went to Billy Graham in Fresno, California when I was 6 years old. I received Christ at the age of 12. At the age of 12, I was here, and I listened to a speaker here for the very first time. I'll share more about that another night. I loved music. I was good at music. I had an identity in high school as a musician. And so I've got family, I've got friends, I've got faith. And then in my high school senior year, I'm coming home from a Friday night football game, and my mom meets me at the door. She says, "If you want to see your dad alive, you got to go to the hospital. He's fallen into a coma. He's not gonna make it through the night." And my dad was my best friend. and there was no close second. So with tears in my eyes, I drove to the hospital, held my dad's hand, told him I loved him. He was gone by 10 a.m. that Saturday morning. And that began a 2-year period in my life where just everything just fell apart for me. Everything fell apart. I was mad at God because God took my best friend away from me. People would say to me, oh, he died of a lung thing. People would say, your dad must have smoked. I wanted to hit him because he didn't smoke a cigarette in his life. It was just a really rare thing that happened to him with numerous bouts of pneumonia that led to his demise. My grandmother was here, retired, and moved to Fresno, so we stopped going to Mount Hermon. And I was like this, isolated, anxious, depressed, lonely, mad at God. I grew up in the church, but it all, I don't need to light another match. You get it, right? It's gone. Everything that I gave my life meaning was, or so I thought, was gone. So I said this, I'm taking a vacation from God. And by the way, I'm going to become an architect so that I can make stuff that'll still be around, because my dad died at 50. My sister was in her 40s when she died of a heart attack suddenly. Nothing lasts, man, other than buildings. So I'm going to be an architect. So I went to Cal Poly. And then I'm there, and I'm getting good grades, and I'm playing in the marching band, and I'm funny, and people think I'm happy, and I'm not happy at all. And I'm doing well in school, but I don't think I want to be an architect, but I don't have a clue what I want to do. And so then this cute blonde, not my wife, that happened later, said, hey, a ski retreat, you want to go? And it was a Christian thing in the Sierras. And I said, yeah, I'll go. And that was it, man. The guy speaks, and he says, Jeremiah 9, he said, if you're wise, don't boast of your wisdom. If you're strong, don't boast of your strength. If you're rich, don't boast of your riches. There's only one reason to boast, and that's what? That you know God. And then this guy literally points at me. He points at me in the room. Like you pick somebody randomly, and it was me. He says, there's someone in the room, you're in class, you're outwardly successful, you're popular, you're funny, everybody likes you, but you're depressed, you're lonely, you're mad at God, you don't have a clue what to do with your life. You need to make knowing God the one thing that matters. Okay. I mean, I knew in that moment that I was living life under the sun, and that had all just been ripped away from me. And I was trying to fix it through work, through pleasure, and it wasn't working. And then somebody came along and said, knowing God. I got down on my knees in the snow, prayed, God, I want to make knowing you the goal. Within a year, I'd changed schools, I'd changed majors, I'd changed states, moved from California to Seattle. And God took my life in a completely different trajectory. Because when this happened, right, and it happens to all of us, God said, what? Look, I've been here the whole time. I've been here the whole time. Did anyone notice? The whole time. There's a light that doesn't go out. What are you holding on to that's actually smoke? Let's pray. Father, our desire is to live as people of hope in a hopeless world. But we'd be the first to confess that in spite of knowing you and loving you, things are taken from us. And so we'd like to surrender tonight, Lord Jesus, and allow you to shepherd us through the pain of loss. And forgive us for trying to hold on with a death grip to things that we need to let go of. And Father, as well, all of us in the room know that there are things in our lives that we'd love to see go away. Affliction, discouragement, financial uncertainty, loneliness, a child not living as we'd hoped. And yet here we are, again. So, Father, in this life under the sun, how grateful we are that the light of the world has come, shining not only into our hearts, but now through our lives, so that we might shine as light, people of hope in a dark world. Teach us this week, through our morning and evening sessions, to live that reality, and we'll thank you for it, praying in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you.